I mean, the harmony is really, really nasty and scrunchy, and that first chord at 82 is pretty extreme if you just look at the the grammar of that chord. And is this also, I think, the first time that the upbeat is slurred? Yeah, I think it is the first time. So that's going to give us a slightly more kind of repressed feeling, perhaps, that it's not just an easy feeling into the tune, but something much more kind of under wraps and squashed. Toby, again, we've got these accents, and a bit, if we just look at the beginning and how how 81, 82 is, what the differences are. We've lost the rhythm of the pedal that Lorena had at the beginning, and we have a new but slightly hidden rhythm in the cello part. And I wondered, Toby, if your accents are kind of just a response to their accent, and again, like more of a shaping thing. So the accent is the strongest point of each bar, and we just phrase away from that.
Yeah, sure.
But there's something a bit more persistent again this time compared to the beginning. And the fact also that this time we don't really get a chance to cadence 87, 88, or at least the bass part, the harmony doesn't budge. Whereas at the beginning, in the 6th bar of the tune, so the bar number's a bit complicated, but the 6th bar of the tune at the beginning, Lorena changes the harmony, but this time we're stuck on the F sharp. So again, maybe there's a sense of that the whole thing is quite painful and anguished, I think, and stuck. Yeah. Then the kind of response or the answer phrase from bar 90, we get almost a kind of canon effect with Toby and then Julia, but the accents have now gone from the melody. And I find when we get here that it's much more of a kind of emotional thing, much more expressive, even though there aren't accents. Something about the writing, Teresa, your part, the first violin, is there's something much more lyrical going on here, even though it's kind of in the same clothes as the previous few bars, but maybe emotionally we are moving. It's an emotional response to the repression of the previous 8 bars, if that makes sense. Yeah. Right. Any questions there?
Just the one, actually, just about this crescendo to the subito piano.
Yes.
And like how much of a, I always find myself asking how much of a crescendo is he wanting, and what, and how, you know, what that really means.
Yeah, I would say that one, I mean, without wanting to give an answer, like maybe a little bit of a crescendo. Maybe it's, I mean, I sort of feel like character-wise, it doesn't want to shout too much. It's still quite under wraps. And there's a bit of opening harmonically, and a glimpse of kind of D major before cadencing into this kind of B minor thing. Yeah, I'd not too much, I think, Toby, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think it will tell. Just listen to the harmony, and it sort of blossoms a little bit, and that maybe is all we need to acknowledge. Just actually good to point that out in bar 87, that we then have a subito in bar 88. And maybe that is quite extreme, that one.
He gets the forte in 87.
Yeah, it feels like quite a scream, that forte, like in a repressed way. All these slight contradictions, but But maybe that is, and then this accent that you have on the last beat of 87 is quite impassioned, perhaps. And that's maybe your goal of the phrase, melodically at least.
Sure.
Okay. Right, going on from 98, I just saw that Rosa from the Chair Quartet joined in, so hi to Rosa. And just to let you know, hello, just to let you know, we're in the second movement of Schubert G major, if you were trying to guess from bar numbers which movement we're in.
Thank you.
Doesn't give it away. So yeah, bar 98. This the Julian Lorena, how might you go about viewing what you have here? Or what does that look like to you?
Is it 98 you're talking about?
Yeah, 98.
I'd say subtle bow vibrato. Is that what you're going after?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. One thing I think that maybe is becoming clear from last week and this week about this movement is how much variation there is as a kind of compositional technique, rather than new stuff. It's again like in the first movement, like there's not much new music that appears. You know, it's like pretty. He sets out what he's doing at the beginning, and it kind of we just live in that, and just get, like the word I said loads last, we get fascinated with what we're experiencing. So 98 is another place where you wouldn't really notice that, I think, as a listener, what has changed. I mean, there's this canon that's maybe the most noticeable thing between cello and first violin, between first violin and cello, and then but then this accompaniment is just the same thing that Toby had the previous couple of lines, the F sharps, but now in a kind of more harmless harmony area. And yeah, I suppose, Toby, you need to think about how to play 81 in reference to how they're playing 98. I think these quaver things, I do see them when they're separate, I do see them quite stubborn. So it's not to shy away from it, just it's not like a nice quaver little thing. not say that you would do that, but that there is a kind of stubbornness at the repetition of it, like Lorraine's part at the beginning, the viola part at the beginning. Teresa and Toby, this theme, which obviously we've had at bar 19. Personally, it's like that second subject in the first movement. I try and just get obsessed with the contour and the journey through it, that you can never get tired of descending these two steps, and then the sort of triad first inversion thing rising, and then a twiddle and a little thing. It's so simple, but and also, Toby, like you're saying, the first movement is we've got a dotted rhythm. No, you were saying that earlier in this movement, those two semis, but that again, such simple things. A dotted rhythm, then an offbeat over a larger bar thing, and then these continuous quavers. I mean, there's quite a lot of variety on a simple level there. And to just get absolutely obsessed with it. You can never find one should never be able to find the solution of how to play something like that. And I mean, we can get a very, very good version, but I think it's really good to always be constantly fascinated, and also be fascinated by the relationship between the two of you through here. Is it a direct imitation that Toby's doing of Teresa, or are you more people in your own worlds, both responding to the harmony or the amount of emphasis that Julie and Lorena are giving the middle, or so play around with those things. I think you can both be very, very conversational, or you can be very, very distanced as well. I think emotionally that can work.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of this piece. I suppose it's a part of the reason why it's so astonishing is that it is both incredibly unified as a quartet, so as 4 people playing and working together, but also you can be incredibly separate individuals. I think that adds to your scope. So maybe put that onto your like big shopping list of like, is it, are we being a unified group at this moment, or are we being 4 protagonists having a discussion at each other or with ourselves? And I think that there is no right answer to that, but that's maybe an interesting thing to consider generally. Yeah, let's jump forward a little bit. I'm always quite interested in this tune, the slurring into 102 and 104 for Toby.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about that.
Yeah, it's quite,
because it doesn't happen the first time.
No, that's a new thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just a new slur over a bar line.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just varying the gestural nature of it, because it is quite chopped up. This it's quite like same. And then, so if you maybe played up that separation a tiny bit before, and then there's sort of the final gesture of the phrase is this there's much more kind of gluiness about it. That might be an interesting thing to explore.
Yeah.
Particularly Toby, your one, because it's so ambitious. The to get to that top sharp. It's quite drastic from the relative innocence of bar 98. If you just saw 98 by itself, just on a piece of paper, you'd sort of think, oh, this is just quite a nice little piece. And yeah.
Can I ask about 105 and 106? The character of that, like how we come out of the tune. Obviously, what you just said about Toby's part, because he's going there, but then I'm repeating the same thing.
Yeah.
And so, does the second time mean that we're sort of like just giving it in because we've already said it? Because he puts the sforzato on the first one. So really,
I think,
like, do we need the other bar?
I think 105 should be stronger than 106. There isn't a diminuendo, but maybe maybe you don't need to sustain forte actively over 2 bars. I think you can.
So it will be okay to sort of, just because you see the piano coming and you're thinking, okay, well, rigidly like subito, but actually, it feels like that bar is there sort of.
It's a good question. I suppose this is also like a bigger question just about markings. And this thing that we've spoken about quite a lot about how the notation system is a pretty flawed system, and there's, you kind of can't, at least at that time, you couldn't write what he maybe meant. So you couldn't really write, let's have a little bit less on the second bar, and then still have a subito piano, but maybe the subito piano is subito from mezzo forte rather than forte, or from mezzo piano, or something like that. If you notated that, that would be so fussy and unnatural. But
he's so fussy about, like, the marking is so heavy.
Yeah, it is. But I personally don't find it as authoritative or authoritarian as like Beethoven's markings. Although as I progress, I'm trying to think of Beethoven's markings as less authoritarian, because I think there's more humanity in him than often he gets credit for, at least in a dramatic way, perhaps. But I think nobody knows, so it's impossible to find the answer here, but I think that he could have, he easily could have re-emphasized that second bar, which would have encouraged you to keep it up longer. He drops the first beat for the middle two. The fact that Toby descends an octave and then loses an accent and stuff, it's just is a softening of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also we just need to, we're going in such sort of detail, but there is, like, later on there's bigger screams. There's a fortissimo sando one, I think, over the page. We can find it, but I think it's the last one. No, I'm wrong, but 190 is he's marked that up more, and then he does write a decrescendo to piano, so that's something else to confuse us. But yeah, I mean, it's this old thing as well, like at the end of the day nobody cares, like, actually, like, so nobody's going to tell you off if you just watered that down a little bit, and if it feels right emotionally to you at that stage of the movement. I would say that where we are in this movement is that we've had enough of the massive drama and like chaos of all that tremolo stuff and like the big rhythmic brass kind of stuff. So actually maybe we're more in a slightly transitional phase of the piece. And I mean, I'm justifying my own case here, but yeah, but do remember that at the end of the day, nobody really cares, because nobody knows the answer. So if anyone cares too much, they're just yeah, they should get off their high horse a bit, perhaps. Also, if you look what's coming up, 109 to me screams as a bit more of an important moment. Yeah, so we just need to balance things with the sort of context, basically. Right. Let's go on from 111. We got this slurred upbeat again, but this is the second half of the melody thing where we have the nice turn towards the major. So maybe this isn't all too nasty. It's only piano, and like Julia, your part in 112, the chromatic thing, this all to me feels much more kind of like happy Schubert or slightly more kind of lyrical nature leader Schubert or something. I know there's lots of kind of assumptions there, but do you know what I mean? That there's something a little bit less kind of angst ridden through all of this, and maybe on a larger scale this is all just the kind of wind down, but until 122 when we have another go at being rather angry. Yeah, I mean, again, just notice the differences. Toby, your part is obviously really rather lovely there. Just an annoying thing, 113 I find very hard to play in tune, and so just like, yeah, a point of information. It's just the D and the G, to make sure those are in tune with Lorena's D pedal. Somehow I think it's also partly because Lorena becomes the bass throughout this, that just our role as a cellist is the way we have to play in tune is slightly different from when we're playing something melodically as a bass line. Yeah. So it's a sound thing, really making sure Lorena is supporting enough here to give a proper bass sound, so we can play in tune on top of that. Yeah, great. Can you see any issues from 118 to 122? Anything that you might think is slightly problematic if you compare those bars to where they are in the first half, wherever they are, 40 to 43.
Mm-hmm. The quavers?
Yes, the constant quavers.
Yeah.
Because in the first half you don't have any kind of rhythmic drive to hold you in place, and the temptation, I think, the natural feeling in these passages to get slower. He does write you that dim again, as we have in the earlier. So maybe our possible writ marking. Who knows? But it's slightly harder to do that when there are all these constant quavers going. So maybe you might like to consider what the effect is if you don't hint at any writ at all, and maybe only just a tiny bit through that dim. I think if you do a bit less than actual, the horror of 122 is a little bit more striking. Now, when we get to 122, this rhythm is quite, like, again, you've probably never seen that kind of thing in a quartet before this moment. We really like to sustain the long notes. So it's definitely not a dotted marking like you have at the beginning. Sorry, in the first part of it in 44. There's much more actual kind of sound going on. And so then you actually don't need to try to play too loudly. If you really sustain the team, just kind of, yeah, I don't know what that is, but something again more orchestral about it. I think that's quite effective. Again, remember the tonic dominant shading, the hierarchy of those through these. And Toby, now you have even more extreme these leaps. I mean, it's utterly crazy, like 124 to 125. I mean, like, what on earth is he playing? I mean, it's enormous, like, jump there. I really try and make it obvious how hard that is, and not try and simplify it at all. So really hold on to that E as long as you possibly can, and then just tumble down to the bottom C sharp. And even more the next one, almost just because it's higher. I think this tonic dominant hierarchy stuff here is important to be aware of, but I don't think you want to let us know that you are doing things less, because it's just like the terror of the drama, I think, is far outweighs any harmonic subtleties that we or niceties at least. Then you have these like lion roars in 129, and we didn't really talk about them so much in the first half, but I really think you can make them as gross as possible, so that so you're not aiming for bada 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 bum kind of clarity, but it is like a roar. And I think you can absolutely hit those sforzandi with the bow. So almost come off and then just hit it basically. So you're getting something that's so like that really kicks you in the guts basically. I think the listener should feel winded by these things. It's so physical. The rests are kind of cool if you can risk stretching them. So like don't come in early, particularly after then that entry. I think if that really isn't just taken for granted. So each of these kind of stops is as shocking to you as the forward moving things. Yeah, a little bit like we spoke about in the first half, but like at 131 at the end of the bar, Therese and Lorena, your scream things again, like the stop of them it creates as much of the drama as the noise part of them.
They're our favorite, John. You know that.
Great. Yeah, and that's sort of, you just got to play loud. 137, 138, the kind of softening, I suppose, harmonically in 138 with the hint of the major. I don't think you should be in a rush through those bars. I sort of feel like the chord has its own density that is going to take its own time to resolve and come out of it. And then when you get to 139, there's sort of almost 2 bars just of kind of scrubbing on this D major chord. I think there as well, time sort of stops. Toby, I never come in the next thing until I'm really feel like the atmosphere is there. And I kind of almost want to freak the audience out. Just to try and create this sense of like what has just happened. And then when this melody appears again, it's such a sort of exploratory and inquisitive and sort of surprise thing. I kind of, if you want a silly image, I do have that kind of feeling of like a little animal popping its head out of the soil or something, and just sort of like looking around to see what destruction has occurred, and in the sort of wasteland of this nuclear catastrophe that's just happened the previous 30 bars. Who knows, like whatever. But there's yeah. Julia, did you have a question there? Yeah.
My computer just made a noise. Yeah, I was wondering, sorry to slightly interrupt that bit about Toby's part, but I was just thinking about bars 1, 3, 3, and 5. I don't think we talked about it the first time around, but when we have that harmony change on the half bar, I was trying to imagine how we would rehearse this and thinking that we would probably run into a feeling that there were too many emphases in that bar.
Yeah, it's very hard to not accent that half bar. And you, yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know, it's quite, those are quite hard, those moments. I think we almost cheat and just hope for the best. So I am not sure I've got a complete answer for that. But I suppose there's a feeling of the speed of the arrival, and yeah, the speed of the bar line. So the gesture that you have into that bar line then has a result. I think technically speaking, if you all just wait for Toby to stop scrubbing, that's kind of a trick. And Toby, I probably stopped scrubbing a little bit before that half bar, the sort of bum kind of thing, but it is. I would, Julia, I would start off by just doing it without the scrubbing, so you just get the kind of the ease of the movement of the gesture, but yeah, it doesn't want to be as strong as the beginning of the bar. But they're slightly awkward places, particularly because we're not really very good at doing tremolo. Nobody's really good at tremolo, and like we don't have to do it in chamber music basically ever.
Look at Samantha.
If you do it in an orchestra, then you've got like loads of other people with you to help out.
Yeah,
Quartets. That's beginning.
Yeah, that's that actually. Yeah, so Schubert's are kind of our tremolo nemesis. And yeah, but I think it's like I was saying last week, just experiment tremming at different speeds in different parts of the bow, and not always the same together as well. Like it doesn't need to be a team effort, just something that sounds pretty extreme. Yeah. Should we go on in this next bit? I mean, the feeling of calm after the storm, I think, is just pretty extraordinary. at 140. Toby, I think we've got page turn there.
Yeah, it's a horrible one. Yeah.
I try and just do mine as quickly as possible at 139.
Okay, so you do it there.
Yeah, I sometimes I do it in the next rests.
Yeah.
If I feel particularly like I don't want to disturb that rest, I might wait and just do it that first gesture from memory, which isn't the biggest challenge. Yeah, this I suppose this is the same as that previous passage, Toby and Teresa, with the canon. I really try not to connect them. Okay. So as in like I often come in late at the end of 144, for example. So I try and like act out a feeling of surprise and act out a sort of hesitancy. So really, really listen to the end of whoever's da da dee dee dum and don't just connect it to da da dee dee dum, because like nobody knows that you're going to repeat again and then again, and then these accents and the ti ba da da dum or ti ya da dum. That's like again this fascination thing, the fact that that Toby goes down and then Teresa goes up. It's like the simplest thing in the world. Like, what could be more simple to create a difference? But
should these be more connected at 145?
I think once the crescendo gets going, then you can almost then kind of gain an uncanny amount of confidence and almost interrupt.
Okay.
Yeah. But you see, I keep on coming back to this idea of having not really made decisions necessarily, but there's a narrative going on that is occupying you whilst you're performing it. So that doesn't necessarily need to depend on what other people are doing. That you can all have at moments all have quite independent narratives, and I think that adds to the kind of epic nature of the piece. That it's kind of on too big a scale for us to care what four people are saying at any one time. Yeah, it's a sort of weird concept to grasp, but in a passage like this also you can really egg each other on if you then want to, and then your arrival into this amazing, shocking C natural in 150. Is it 150? 149 is even more kind of bewildering. That needs to be pretty enormous. And maybe the rate of crescendo from 147 to 9 doesn't necessarily need to be constant. Maybe it sort of starts and then at the end suddenly flies out, because you don't know where you're going to get to until the very, very last moment. And what just to notice it, I mean, it's just utterly extraordinary that that Toby and Teresa, that you're in unison. That is bonkers. And the sound that you get from the cello A string, I would suggest, Toby, and then the G string of the violin, that is such an incredible noise. Almost like he's orchestrating, I don't know, like 8 horns and like 4 bassoons or something like that. I don't know, but like just this sort of like noise of kind of like a foghorn or something. It's like utterly crushing. And then the way he resolves out of it in this it's so upset how you get to this B minor chord in 152. It just like it does this enormous thing to that C natural, and then it's like all hope drains from it, and you couldn't imagine at 147 that's what's about to happen. We definitely do quite a significant subito pianissimo in 152. So sustain that piano and then because it's almost like that's an extra layer of horror, because obviously harmonically when we get to 151 we probably could predict that we're going to resolve to a B minor chord, but then that we're still shocked that we actually did do that. I think it's kind of amazing. And then again, how quickly things are changing. 153 is again one of these like weird convenience bars that Schubert does in this piece, that you would, the last thing you'd expect, just like, okay, we're going to get back to D major, let's just flick the switch basically. I mean, I have no idea really how he does that and gets away with it. You know, like how we can get stuck in keys for so long and then he just like, oh, whatever, let's go back to D major. I know we've just been in D major, but still,
yeah,
that little diminished chord is all he needs as the pivot chord to get back. And then 154, okay, this is quite hard technically speaking to get it together. I can suggest that the best way of doing it is that the Pitts leads that chord change, and the 153 you can kind of feel that out of tempo if you want as well. It's just a kind of little murmur that then comes back, and then the Pitts just snaps it out, and you can just have quite a confident and one kind of feeling into that. And then yeah, and then how different, although the notes are identical from 141 to 155, they're absolutely identical notes, but like how differently they are is again astonishing. You might wonder what stroke to use, you guys in the middle. I kind of quite like how upright everything is here, almost like, you know, when you have like in a wind section, like the sort of that kind of repeated note things, I kind of see that it more like that here than a kind of our favorite sort of up at the point, whoa, 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 whoa. But experiment. That's just how I feel about it. It could be quite cool for that to be quite long, and then Toby and Teresa could play up the shortness of their thing, like a fun thing to play around with. And also how short, Teresa and Toby, should you be? I mean, yeah, we got dots, but as we all know, that isn't really an indication of shortness per se. Yeah, you just need to kind of like find your own way with that. Maybe the C natural now this time in 163 is less awful, but it's still pretty big. And then how we then slip so quickly into this recap, I suppose, is kind of amazing. Any questions about that all that stuff? Cool. Yeah, so again, this variation of what's going on in the background from the recap. Obviously the violins are very different to how they are at the beginning, and Lorena now has the little triplet thing at the end, so you need to just work out how you're going to show that without stealing the limelight. But maybe this thing, the word I said a bit earlier, stubborn, maybe there's something stubborn about the texture, and that like in the first movement actually as well, under the second subject, that once you establish that these like a very sort of like blocks of texture, and so maybe you need to just find something that works and then just don't budge from it, don't change it, because it doesn't need to change. But you just also obviously need to give Toby some space. But this, like the simple thing, Toby is long, you guys are short, you know, and Lorena's sort of connecting in the middle, but we just put those blocks together, we can get a texture that works. Right. Yes. I think also maybe it's quite nice to notice how simple it is. I mean, it's just, this tune is always just an 8-bar phrase. I mean, it's like, it is really, really basic, and to create what he does out of it is kind of amazing. But again, you get this really simple little cadence and almost little quirky, almost comical. Julia and Teresa, your little last bum thing. I mean, it's almost too simplistic. So maybe that chimes slightly into what you were saying last week about it having a slightly ancient feel. This movement with the pedals, with the kind of repetitive, there's something slightly hypnotic about it, or distant, or yeah, that kind of stuff. Now, finally, we get a nice tune, so you can finally use loads of vibrato, and this dolce, and the accents have gone from the melody, and they're still hiding a bit, aren't they, in the accompaniments, but this is this our first major version of it? I think it is our first. Yeah, it is the first major version. Yeah. So I mean, you just need to create that somehow. Toby, in your part, I really try and stay back in that stubborn world and make this really dry. I think I actually do something unheard of in my bass line playing, and actually have quite a short stroke in the sort of lower part of the bow, just to do something that is so different from what they're doing. I don't know if it works, but I feel sort of, at least with my three buddies, I feel slightly rogue doing that. But I also could imagine doing them. I think I do the next ones, the pianissimo one. Yeah, because this is piano, and then we get the repeat of it in 196 in pianissimo. I think I do those right at the point. So really and just try and make it this weird little rhythm. And so if you wanted to listen to it, you would notice that it was quite odd, but I think it just adds a kind of slightly eerie quality to this major. Like we've said before, there's nothing just overtly jolly about Schubert's majors. You know, this definitely not like, oh, finally we get a nice little tune in the major in this lovely piece. Been waiting about 34 minutes by this stage.
They ask about the rhythms when he does variations on the tunes and writes like quavers and things like this. Do you think he expects it to be sort of rigid, a little bit rigid underneath the tune, or is there a way, like, can you be flexible?
Yeah, that's a good question, Lorena. In this movement, I tend towards the rigid side, just because of how it all starts, setting up this kind of chain reaction of rhythmic interplay in the accompaniments. And the alterations, and just coming back from where your drone gesture at the beginning, I think is such a characteristic feature of the movement that I kind of feel the tunes have to obey that and find their own flexibility within that. But I kind of feel in these tunes the bar lines need to be pretty regular. And and then we have that can then contrast with the lost moments, like where we were talking about around 140. Like but I definitely think there's the rigid side of this movement gives it a slight, makes us aware that it's not all just sort of repeated tunes, that there's something a little bit more serious going on. Because I don't think we should finish, when we get to the end of this movement, I don't think you should finish thinking, oh, that was such a beautiful movement. I think we should obviously not think it's an ugly movement, but the beauty or kind of like lyricism isn't something I think we should end up being left with. I think we need to be quite disturbed by it. And yeah, I think the only moment in the whole piece really I think I said this before, but that where we can actually just sort of sit back is the trio of the next movement. You know, it's the only place where we're allowed a little moment of respite. But even there, I kind of think that is tinged with something. That Rainer has Rainer Schmidt had a great description of that movement, which is probably not the most politically correct thing to say, but we'll see what happens when we get there. Or I'll send it in a text to you guys. Yeah. Anyway, that's for maybe we'll get there today. We'll see. Yeah. Just sort of going through, like, obviously all these variations are getting more and more varied. 183 is more of a variation, and yeah, again, sorry to repeat it, it's just remaining fascinated by it all the time, but not fiddling with it too much, because of this sense that we're just traveling and traveling and traveling. And yes, the pianissimo at 196 can be pretty small, I think. So the B, so this horn call from the beginning at 194, that's the biggest one, isn't it? With the fortissimo sando piano. I think that's bigger than all the other ones we have, if I remember. Yeah, the beginning's only forte, sando piano, but yeah, so that, I think those can maybe be out of tempo, or not actively out of tempo, but not feeling like you're going 2, 2, 3, ba ba dum. Yeah, so just a kind of moment, and then off we go. 204 is pretty amazing how quiet all of that is. Maybe that's the most broken of all of these. Almost like as we progress through the movement, this tune is getting, in some ways, is getting more and more uncertain of itself, and that's kind of the last quiet one, at least, because I know Lorena and Toby, you kind of get a noisy one at 212, but there's definitely a feeling that we're breaking down, and that we're sort of losing any kind of hope. And then the cadence of that one, the 210 to 211, that's really the most kind of like destroyed of them all, I think. With you can't even use your bows, we're so broken by it. And it's pianissimo, isn't, like, often he remarks that bar piano. Yeah, this is and Toby with a slide. Sorry, with a slur, I do sometimes slide to that A. That might maybe some people think it's a bit cheap, I don't know, but I just to try and feel like I can, like I can't even manage to do that fourth. So really thrown away, like the miniature little kind of thing. Just an idea.
Okay.
I do it less and less, actually, I must say, these days.
Maybe I'll go through the process at least.
Exactly. Yeah, you 10 years of a slide to a harmonic. And,
yeah.
Can I ask about 204?
204.
Yes, that little random dim that I have.
Yes.
Why do I have it?
I think everyone should. It looks where it's marked in the score that it might. I think it's up at the top because it applies to I think everyone has it. Pretty sure. In your parts.
You have it. Does everybody have it?
Is that?
Yeah, it's definitely in my part here.
I'm pretty sure it's in my part.
Yeah, it's in my part.
I think same thing happens with the read later. He also writes it at the top, but I think it's probably...
Yeah.
And so that this time the dim wouldn't be like an extra dim, right?
Well, who knows? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all pretty broken and pretty like hopeless and pretty fragmented, and yeah, play around with it, see what the context, see how the context speaks to you. I'd say I don't think I've got a hard and fast answer for you there. When Lorena gets the tune at 212, 213 is quite interesting. That's a different harmony there. Maybe a little bit more optimistic, as if we're going to go somewhere, but we then just get back into our E minor zone. Yeah, these bars, it's just all kind of like last gasp effort at trying to achieve something. And who knows if we do achieve anything, but yeah, particularly the 2, 16 and 17, which is very like kind of brass like maybe in the bottom two, and these chords, there's something quite proud about the chords, and yeah, but it's kind of all just closing stuff. And then when we get to 19, this, yeah, the final E, I think you can think very gesturally about these. So always these accents from the second beat, and then bouncing off Toby. There's something very so resigned and yeah, quite sort of almost quite empty. I find with this, and that you don't really need to do anything. You just need to play it and just state it. I think and just acknowledge if you're going up or down, basically. And then obviously we then have this remarkable ending for the last 4 bars. And Toby, that octave that you have in 225, yeah, I think that is what needs to inspire you all to go major. However that happens, probably taking a little bit of time. Yeah. And then, yeah, it's just the most touching thing. the simplicity and honesty and resignation, but in a respectful and sort of hopeful. Yeah, there's a yeah, it's sort of quite religious almost, the end of this. I don't like, yeah, it's like how you might end a chorale or something, I don't know, but something very kind of plaintive about it. He does, like, nothing else needs to be said, nothing else can be said. It's sort of like the slow movements version of the last 2 bars of the first movement, you know, and yeah. And I think you could maybe even use vibrato at 220, that chord in 226. I kind of feel I want to, which isn't normally what I would do, obviously, in a moment like that chord. But I think if it can shimmer and just glow, I think it needs to glow. And then the last 2 bars, I almost think you don't need any time. But see how you feel. Like different days you might want to have to, but it's everything's been said. We've got to just let it go and put it to rest, and yeah, leave that room, I suppose. Yeah. Do you have any questions about that? The end of that? No. No. Cool. Okay. Next movement. What do you make of this? What are your thoughts?
To me, it's very much like Mendelssohn Scherzo, elves and fairies in the woods.
Yeah.
Again, it's kind of weirdly trite after what we've already had.
Yeah.
Almost disappointing in how trite it is.
I mean, it's a really, really kind of pretty bad tune, isn't it? Or like motive, like, I mean, like this, doesn't feel particularly sophisticated or
No.
anyone else?
We noticed as well that the trio section, or at least, yeah, it's in G major, right? It kind of feels very strange that the beginning of the movement is like the G major is not actually the key of the movement. It's just another key within. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, because we're in B minor, so G major is quite an odd key to have the trio in. That's very, very true. And somehow, I suppose, when we get to the trio, the G major doesn't feel like the home key of the piece either, does it? You'd think after having that whole first movement, you think, oh, that's a familiar sound world, or familiar key. But that's interesting. One thing is just a simple thing to say, but this is the only like normal length movement. It's sort of, it's the only movement of this piece you could ever use for an audition or a thing like that. It's it's, what do you think what's it about? Like, what is this scherzo about? Why is it here?
Is it sort of to compensate the drama of the others? So it's just like a little intermezzo movement, a bit like the 132 the random quartet movement.
The second movement. Yeah. Hey, that's very true. Actually, there is similarities there.
Just throw it away, kind of. Just Yeah,
it's a bit like I've just been working on Death and the Maiden with the Chair Quartet, most of whom are here, and that scherzo as well is very much of a sort of palate cleanser. And there's not like, it's obviously amazing, but it's kind of just a very rhythmical movement. And I think this one too is just a lot about just simple rhythm. I mean, a bar of eighth notes and a bar of quarter notes. I mean, that's like pretty simple stuff there. I mean, it's like those like basic exercise you do as a kid. It's a kind of 3/4 version of that. I'm not wanting to trivialize it, but I think it's important just to be aware of how simplistic that is. Right. We've got like, if we do think melodically, it's interesting again, this use of a semitone and then a triad, and that's the bare bones we have, and those things we have been using. Is quite similar tune to quite like not a million miles away motivically, so we can understand where it comes from. Accents. What do you think accents denote here in this movement?
quite pinchy.
Yeah. And I think not about the character of them. Do you think they show something more?
They show like, sorry.
Toby?
Well, I was just going to say they kind of seem to highlight the phrasing very accurate. And so you've got the 2/2 and then the four bars, and so it's just really showing you where he really wants the phrase markings to be, and they're very clear and obvious. Yeah,
the easiest place to spot this is they kind of show us also where the main voice is. Yeah, so it's the kind of thing that like Albenberg would have written a Hauptstimme marking for us, or whatever. 33, so the second half, that is where it's most obvious. So Teresa has one, then Lorraine, and then Teresa, and then Toby, you have one. And so it's always there when you have the full 2 bars of the tune, the motive, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so that's a really important thing to be aware of and to notice. for me, a lot of the success of this movement relies on the your punctuation of from a musical grammar perspective. So this first phrase, we hear the tune first, and then we hear the response to the tune, and then we have a tail. Yeah, and the tails are really important, that they feel like tails. So we have this, yeah. I would do a lot of work first of all with this piece, taking out all the quavers. So just here, and then it kind of makes it really obvious. It's just like playing a Haydn minuet or something, just on a slightly larger scale. But it's, when you just get a bit, again, obsessed with that kind of stuff, and then it really then starts to work. So like you guys already do really well, just like the short, long stuff, and all that kind of stuff. And so it really just is well punctuated, and so it just speaks to us, because otherwise it just is a continuous thing which doesn't really make much sense. Yeah. And the best thing about that is that it makes it so much easier to play together. You just don't need to, because if you know where you're going, you can then do the same thing, so you can then play together. Yeah, it's the old trick. You don't need to try and make it together. If you're speaking the music in the same way, it will be together. Right. Yeah, so like from 17, simple little long, short, long thing, isn't it? So easy, but hard, obviously. But the basic concept of that is really, really simple. Yeah. And yeah. So if you first of all go through that and just mark in your phrase lengths, work out which bar of the 4 or the 8 is important, or if I think there's sometimes different lengths, but yeah, then it will already make a lot more sense. Yeah. Stroke wise, you probably wouldn't be surprised to know that we do basically most of it on the string. Not like weirdly so, but just so it's not a bouncy bow exercise, because that is massively annoying thing to hear for 7 minutes or whatever, and that will make the whole motive just drive you mad. And maybe there's a little bit of lightness that we can have sometimes, but like a lot of it is just that if it's on the string lightness, it will just sound brilliant, and then you can play it quite fast as well, because I think it that sort of, or at least give the sense that it's quite sort of fleeting. Yeah, like the dots, just to return to our favorite thing, like Toby's dots in 24, and it literally is, again, the classic marking of dots meaning not slurred.
Yeah. And
then maybe at 25 you could then think that they're there to, so you bubble a little bit, where so that there's more contrast between your notes and the slurs up above. Yeah. Right. Dynamics are quite dramatic in this piece, and again, so in this movement, and he's quite careful about when things are written and when we go like to odd places. So for example, into bar 29, you'd really expect just to go to 29, but then putting this hairpin afterwards is quite an extreme marking, which is sort of a harmonically driven. But I just be careful where things are marked, and if things go to forte, if they go to fortissimo, or if they go to 3Fs, because there's quite a lot of that going on in this second half. Yeah. A lot of conversation stuff going on here as well. Like from the double bar, if you really try and do the balance with where these accents are written, so the other people really hardly need to play at all. And then you have this enormous crescendo from 2 Ps to 3 Fs in like 3 bars, which at this speed isn't very long. I think stroke wise at 41 and the 3 Fs, you can just use as much bow as you possibly can. Just as even Toby, just so it's like utterly Titanic symphonic kind of effect. Again, the kind of the way that we change worlds in this movement is kind of extraordinary and inspired by what we've done in the previous 2 movements, but the speed at which they come here I think is really amazing, because what you want to achieve in this movement is to leave us having had an incredibly vivid experience, and so it's both rhythmically a sort of palate cleanser, but within that there are memories of the kind of massive hits that you've had in the previous, so it's not divorced from what's been going on in the rest of the piece. Character wise, I think also there's a huge range of like different characters. There's some like fun stuff, there's some silly stuff, there's some tragic stuff, there's like end of the world stuff. Pretty massive thing goes on like 85, 86. This sort of scream from you all, and then Toby's just left by himself and just peters out. I mean, it's kind of very humorous. Well, there is a kind of humor going on, I think, at least.
It's just like a little bit like how he does it in the first movement, leaves me hanging on those.
Yeah, definitely.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's that bit, for example, Toby, you could, I mean, you play it like 3-4 times anyway, so it doesn't, you've got options. Yeah. But definitely can sort of peter out completely there. Like maybe one time you do a writ, maybe another time you like just almost stop playing. And just so again, there's a kind of conversational rhetoric going on between you all. Yeah, I think stroke wise, the more legato stuff you're doing in this in your rehearsals, so taking out the quavers, that will really help put together your shape and your direction. And I would suggest working it under tempo and exaggerating your directions. And then I just go through it loads and loads and loads under tempo and just hear the harmony and let that guide you. Then the dynamics make sense, and it all kind of like it just will come together quite quickly, I think. Intonation is a nightmare from like this whole B major kind of zone around 110, 9 around there. That's really, really hard. I would do that most days. All the way up to 125 basically. Think in your dynamics as well, like how there's a hierarchy in the volume, but also that you can vary the dynamics with the amount of sound that you're making. So like these things nearer to the end, 131, that actually not trying to play too loud, but just making really, really quality sound is quite important. And yeah, do you have any questions about it? I sort of like, in a funny way, this movement is kind of, I mean, it's extraordinary, but it kind of just need to hear it and just go through the harmony, because that's what's sort of really remarkable about it. And yeah, Julia?
I really like what you mentioned about it being silly, because then I felt very differently about like, I guess I'm focused on it because it's my part, but bar 72, no, I lie, 44, after this massive triple forte thing, and I'm all by myself.
Yeah.
Silly. Obviously, it's kind of like I miscounted. But then each time that comes back, I'm a dynamic less. So 72 is forte, and then the final one, in like 1 3 3 4 5, 1 3 6, it's like I'm the most self-conscious because I'm tired of being left hanging. I think that's really nice.
Yeah. It's almost sort of cartoon-like.
Yeah.
There's I think you can have a lot of fun as well around 108 and 109, 10, 11, 12, around there. Sorry, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That shift harmonically between this kind of C major thing and then the B major thing. Quite cool how they're just, again, he's just putting them next to each other. Doesn't need anything to be able to do something that on paper might look a little bit naughty. Yes. The forte, so jumping around a little bit in this, the forte in 69, really make sure that's not too much. That's like, it's only forte. That's quite a low dynamic for the loud stuff. Yeah, the accents from the double bar, when everyone is going and we just want to hear individual voices, I think they can have quite a pronounced front to attract the attention to yourself. So it's not sort of but I think we need a yeah, it's a bit more of a kind of normal accent. Yeah, the end is slightly tricky. Is it just the last two bars? Think about the length of your last note. Like always, but make sure that the note both starts and finishes. Like the end of that note is quite crucial. Right, let's go into the trio, unless you have any other questions about that. And then we can, by the end of today, we might even have finished that movement. We can have all of next week on the astonishing last movement. Yeah, so the trio begins a little bit like the slow movement begins, this B, this theme of a kind of pedal call to action or whatever. You just to give you guys to give me a few thoughts about the trio. Okay.
Waltzy?
What? Sorry.
Sort of waltzy. Simple, really.
Yeah.
Just relaxing.
Yep.
Okay.
I guess this is the first time my pedal is not threatening. It's just yeah, it's interesting. It doesn't really like it goes to G like once or twice, like 2 cadences or something, but overall it feels peaceful.
Yeah, completely. It is amazing. The pedal again is a dominant pedal, like the slow movement, but the similarities are in what's actually on the paper is remarkable. If you look at the beginning, I know it's 3 and the other one's in 4, but like if you actually just like look at them on paper next to each other, even the melody has a kind of similarity, but they couldn't be further apart in character. I think it's really cool, first of all, to fix your mechanism, so the accompaniment mechanism that's going on here, and very, very cool to have different kind of characters for your voices. So Teresa, I don't think you're necessarily a response to Lorena because of your accent. So there's almost a kind of like music box, mechanical kind of thing going on here. Yeah, and Julia, you are this sort of obviously like a middle kind of motoric thing going on. But I think that if you can make the accompaniment incredibly simple and clear and kind of pristine almost, then again that will give the melody a lot more space to do what it needs to do. First of all, it's the last thing we're expecting after Toby's B thing. That this little one note change is exactly the same as into the second subject of the first movement. Just going up a semitone, and then just everything is changed. The overall kind of character thing, I do like, yeah, what you were saying, Teresa, like a waltz or like a Ländler or something like this. It's so kind of Austrian, I suppose, in a folky way. There's such a beautiful simplicity about that, but almost like it's kind of like a beautiful piece of china or something that it's incredibly fragile. The accent placements, again, are very, very interesting in the theme, and gives it a definite encouragement to a kind of swing to it that you might not do if the accents and those hairpins weren't there. I really think, Toby, we can never get tired of going up to the G in bar 10. It's like repeatedly the most incredibly beautiful thing, but that he almost tops by putting a counter melody up to that B.
Yeah. B in 18,
yeah. And this counter melody from bar 13 to the tune, I think, is really one of the most astonishingly beautiful things. But it's all pianissimo. The opening section and the ending of it as well. So whenever it's in this G major world like that, so we have to. It's this Schubert thing he does so often. Like the moments where you really get to sing, he makes it pianissimo because it's not easy enough. We can't let it out and express. It's the beauty, the most sort of perfect beauty moments are those that are the most precious and the most personal. So we don't want to share them really with anyone, and we can share them to each other in the group, but you really need to create an atmosphere where you're forcing the listener to hear how precious and how personal it is, that you're just letting them through a tiny little chink in the door or something, just so they glimpse at this beautiful scene that's almost too beautiful to be witnessed, you know. Play around with the accompaniment to see how kind of odd and quirky you can make it, because I think if it does go a little bit down the quirky road, it draws the attention to the beauty of the melodic line. Again, if we go into the second half, Schubert, just like that, turns it and we get into this new key. Again, these effortless modulations that are very awe-inspiring. We get a crescendo now, and so we can get a bit bigger and a little bit more mature, a little bit more kind of, just a little bit more grown up, I suppose. This is quite hard intonation, this second half. It's a bit annoying, but kind of just needs to be done. But I think you can really, the melody is really much more florid as well. And you can really open up, and maybe even tempo wise you can move if you want. Julia's counter melody is really amazing as well. Toby, I think just jumping ahead, I think there might be a misprint in this edition in 31.
Right.
I tried playing that as a D sharp loads, but I think it should be an F sharp.
In 31.
Yeah, I think it's a mistake.
F sharp.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. The D it just sounds a bit odd, the D sharp. Not that that's a reason to discard it, but I think that yeah, to see what happens in 35 as well. That we go down to F sharp. I think it's harmonic. Yeah, I think it's just a mistake. Yeah, but so as soon as the music has grown and sort of entered the room, it just fades off again as well. And it's up to you how you control the fade out through 32 to 6. But you could do it with time, you could do it without any time, so it's just sort of one thing, and then the next thing suddenly we're shocked to be back into the into the opening material. Toby, I do these accents at 37. I do harmonics on them to try and make them a little bit more like bell-like. Yeah. Yeah, again, I mean, it doesn't really need to be said, but a lot of what Schubert's doing is just rewriting it all. So you all have lots of different jobs to do. So make sure that when you're doing your different jobs, you are actually being two people where necessary. Yeah, and then we have this coda, which gets quieter and quieter and quieter and more fragile. And this sort of amazing little riff at the end as well. I think it's just like a music box kind of winding down. It almost like runs out of steam. Yeah, again, it's the same thing that we've been talking about, but the way the melodies talk to each other, the way that all the parts interact. I suppose there's a little bit more interaction going on in this movement than in others. Just it seems a little bit more on a chamber scale, at least in the trio, but the whole movement is much more kind of like a quartet piece, with moments of like brief symphonic memories at least, but still I think that the way that you two, particularly Toby and Teresa in this, that the way you two interact is still not as straightforward as just as imitation or trying to play together or this kind of stuff. I think that it's operating on a higher plane, the emotionally and sort of expressively. And sometimes you should be completely together, like when the counter melody is there. If like one time, if it's really, really trying to be together and to make one thing out of it, and another time, Teresa, you go up somewhere, but then Toby does exactly the opposite. So we still have this kind of slight feeling of distance in it all. Yeah. Any questions about that?
I just have a question about my markings from 40, and the fact that he slurs everything together, but little slurs. And I'm assuming that the slur between the accent and then the start of the theme is just because he effectively wants 5 voices there. He wants the bell to be continuing and then the voice coming in at the same time, rather than it being an actual slur between the 2 voices. It's just to try and overlap.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, Toby. Yeah, like if he didn't do a slur, you might, if you were not you might be tempted to play that D really short or something.
Yeah, I think it's just, so is that just like he hasn't got enough voices and I'm just trying to play 2 things at once effectively?
Yeah, I mean, you could try and do it like a clever fingering, like do that D as a harmonic.
On a harmonic and then let it ring.
Yeah, let it ring and then jump to the A string or something. I do some of those harmonic Ds, fourth finger on the G string. So like
yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Wherever it is.
On the
in first position of the fourth finger.
On first position, on the G string.
Yeah, where it's either the C or the D. I can't remember. And at the end, Toby, I go up the D string in the writ. So yeah.
Oh right, okay.
Risky, but
yeah, that's nice and risky, but fun risk.
It's quite nice, and it sort of like adds to the breakdown of our music box kind of feel.
So you shift between the D and the G.
Yeah, I do from the B, the upbeat. I go 3, 4, 1, 3. Then I slide up to the G, and then
I see.
Again, not all audible, but
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Just to make life hard for yourself.
I was going to say, that just makes life, okay.
Fun. And then Julia, the last bar, I think you can really writ as much as you want to, and then all of you just keep that pause as well. It's very tempting to just give up that last bar, but if it's really da dee dee da da. Yeah. So
we mentioned it was kind of awkward the way it ends. Like Teresa really wants to have the top G.
Yeah.
And I end on a B, and it just feels a bit like, and then we have to go back.
Yeah, you're quite right. It's quite sort of it's inconclusive.
I always imagine it like a music box that just runs out.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
rather than like sort of just winds down and sort of stops like in a creepy horror movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, or it just finishes wherever it's going to finish, where the mechanics stop.
Yeah,
and then you have to go into something else.
Yeah, I think that's nice.
The music box would lose pitch as well as the tempo.
I know, yeah.
So if the fingering doesn't work, then we're very often technically.
You could give it a go.
The slide down.
But to be serious about that, I think you could definitely, without changing the pitch, give the sensation of that kind of effect. So the sound can definitely become sort of worse and worse. I think the sound can really like deteriorate. So almost to the point of changing its pitch. Yeah. I mean, that sort of thing, maybe just as a sort of rehearsal technique, it's fun to, you have that idea, then let's try that idea, because you obviously probably won't do that in a concert, but let's just try it to hear what it sounds like, because by hearing it, we might then get a sense, we might learn something about how the sound decays, or something about what happens in that moment, and then you just do it without moving your fingers down. Yeah, but I think all of these, the weirder the idea just doesn't mean you shouldn't try it, and just to experience all these things. There's no one telling you it has to be so, or we spend our lives as musicians obeying rules or following instructions, or trying not to be naughty, or trying not to be bad, and it's always such a negative life we lead, or it's so hard to escape from those negative kind of the years and years of being told that you're not good, the years and years of being told not to do that, and stuff, that like, I think it's good for us to allow ourselves to do that, and to be a bit naughty, or be bad, or be not good. And then put it back into context. Yeah. Great. Yeah, I think we should probably be done. Can I set you guys some homework? And this is being lazy, because I've never done this, but and maybe it doesn't matter that I've never done it, but like in the last movement, we do get this. It goes through the most extraordinary number of keys. Maybe you've already done this, but I've always wanted to just like write them down and to see how many there actually are, because I kind of wonder if it actually does go through at least, not necessarily every key, but all 12 all 12 pitches of the chromatic scale. And I wouldn't be surprised if it does. I'm just thinking about A, F sharp and A flat, and already know that it goes to those three. So maybe that's just a relatively fun thing to do in these days.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. Okie dokes. Thank you everyone for coming along. We will do our last one next week at the same time. And it's so lovely to see so many of your names on the screen. And hopefully we can they're now faces. Oh no, a couple. Hopefully we can keep on going, and we'll get through to the climax of this astonishing piece.
Thanks, John.
All right, guys, have a good week and see you later.
Thank you. Thanks. Sounds
Bye.
good. Bye, everybody.
Marvelous, John. Marvelous.
Thank
Thank you.
For everybody to say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. I'm ending, unless I'm supposed to keep it on. Am I
Just
supposed to?
No.
Julia, just I was gonna the thing I'm gonna tell you that Rainer said.
Oh,
Switch off the recording.
turn off the recording.
Fine, he said it is fine, like, but he just did describe the trio, the image he had.